And welcome to our Around the ECHL podcast. This is number 4 on the season. And very honored to have with us on the broadcast, or on the podcast, I should say, today, is the voice of the Wheeling Nailers. I like to refer to him, as he said, as America's favorite DJ, but it's DJ Abisalih from the Wheeling Nailers. DJ, buddy, as always, great to see that handsome face of yours. And welcome to Around the ECHL.
Tommy, Maurice, thanks so much for having me. It's great to chat with you guys. It feels like 2016 all over again.
It does. And yeah, you know what? That's where I was going to start. We had a replay of the 2016 Kelly Cup Finals last week over at the iPick Theater across the way, and it was really fun. You know, the week month before we did the South Carolina Game 7, and then we did the Wheeling one. And what I forgot, DJ, is how much you guys outshot us in that second period and then in the game. It was amazing. You know, obviously the final score didn't indicate how well you guys played, but I think the difference in that game, you know, if you remember or if you go back and look, is number one, how well Riley Gill played that night, because he was playing out of his mind and obviously wanted that cup badly. But, you know, I forgot Eric Roy. He was the star of the show that night. He was all over the score sheet.
Yeah, I could see the identity of the Allen Americans change when Riley Gill got put in that series, because he didn't play games 1 and 2, game 2 being that wild 7-6 game that Wheeling went up 7-1 and Allen scored 5 in the first 10 minutes of the third period. And I'm going, what is going on right now? But Gill came back game 3. We won that at our place, but you just saw that Allen played so much more confidently, a more defensive game, rather than feeling that, even though they had the offensive guns like Costello, like Steppes, where they didn't necessarily have to score 5-6 goals a game, because they knew that Gill was very much a safety valve back there. And then, like you said, game 6, you guys got the lead early. Your power play was strong in the first period. I remember that. Roy was a big factor from the blue line, but Wheeling was starting to come back. And this was a Wheeling team that had so many comebacks through that year, where it was kind of nothing for them to be down 1 in the third period and just looking for that tying goal. And I remember the defining moment of that game that probably won you guys the cup that night was a save by Gill with about 6 minutes left on Ty Loney that would have made it 3-3. And if that happened, I mean, all bets are off going forward. But the fact that he stopped that, you guys maintained the lead, I think that gave you the jolt that you needed to get to the finish line.
Well, that's a good point. There's times people talk about all the time, a big hit, a big save or something like that, how that changes the complexion of the game. And that right there is a good example of that. Now, what we need to do is, being that we've not seen each other in the finals since 2016, is we need to have a sequel this season. Hopefully we'll have it this year.
That'd be a lot of fun. We'll have to do it in the conference final now that we're in the Western Conference, but
True.
It would still, I think our fans would absolutely eat it up getting a chance to face off with you guys again. I think your guys' fans seem to enjoy it. The two cities really enjoy. I love going to Allen. I know Tommy's had a ball coming up here to Wheeling, so it would be a lot of fun for everybody involved.
It would be, DJ. And, you know, I remember, just as I think back to that series and how much fun it was. And, you know, we got in a little trouble early in that series, and I thought, you know, this could be slipping away. But you know, the Americans, as they did back then, and with that group, they just never quit. I mean, you know, with Chad Costello, I don't think he has that in his vocabulary. And, you know, he was amazing. Gregor Hansen scored a big goal in that final game for us. As you mentioned, DJ, the 3 power play goals might have been the difference in that final game, or at least the final game, what turned out to be the final game in Allen in that game 6. But the one thing that sticks out to me, and you might remember, you have a better memory than I do, but I remember Benny Arsenault just took one of your players out right along the boards down in the corner. And I remember, I think I said he got Arsenault'd. And I don't remember who that was. Maurice might remember. DJ, do you remember that? Because I could hear that hit all the way up in our broadcast booth.
I don't. It's kind of funny because he almost gets looked at secondary for us when it comes to the physical play in the playoffs, because we ran into heavyweight Trevor Gillies in the conference final against South Carolina. And the Gillies one sticks out to me more because he put one of our guys into about the 8th row in game 1. He put Andrew Ram, like, I could see the hit coming, and I'm like, oh, this is not going to end well. And he just plastered him, took Ammon out for the rest of that game. Then he clobbered, I want to say it would have been Dan Fick behind the net. And then he was going to make it a trifecta and hit Kevin Schultz. And I was like, oh my God, like we got to rein this guy in or our team's going to be killed by the time we get to game 2. So like, I wish I could remember the Arsenal one, but man, Gillies, like, and the fact that he got quieted for the rest of that series, I think gave Wheeling a big upper hand to be able to get to you guys in the final.
It's always a big deal. And, we're talking about 2016. We're talking about that great run that we both, both teams had and we both got to enjoy. Well, what about this year? You got, I think, 13 players signed so far. How does the team look, in your opinion, so far to this point?
This has been fascinating to watch. Like, and everybody will say all the cliches. Well, this is a different year than any other. And I feel like I go into that every summer where I'm like, okay, this is a much different year than it was the previous year. This has been wild. So first off, we had a coaching change in the offseason. Mike Davis, after 2 years, not making playoffs track. So we brought in Mark French, who's got a lot of great experience, won 2 Calder Cups with Hershey, the AHL. And what he and Derek Army, the player on that 16 team, now in his second scenario as an assistant coach, what they've been able to do with the recruiting game has just been fascinating to watch, where they hit the college ranks strong, they hit the major junior ranks strong, and now you start to see the impact of what different leagues. We've gotten 2 guys out of the EIHL, Dryden Dow and Kevin Dufour. We've gotten a Norfolk player who we haven't announced yet. We've gotten Michael Pellick out of Atlanta. Like, you just see where all these different players are starting to come in from. And you're like, wow, this is going to be probably one of the most stacked ECHL rosters that we've seen here. But then you also have to take a step back and go, well, wait a minute. If we're good and we're getting all these opportunities, that means probably the whole league body is probably going to take a step growing in the positive direction too. So everybody else is probably going to be better around us at the same time, which I guess if you look at it as a whole is going to make for a much better product for everybody to watch.
America's favorite DJ, the voice of the Wheeling Nailers, DJ Abisalih, joining us here on Around the ECHL. Tommy Daniels, along with my broadcast partner of 10 years, the one and only, the great Maurice Fitzgerald. And, DJ, you and I, as we've talked, might be 2 of the few broadcasters that are actually traveling this year around the league. Give me some of your concerns. Have you thought much about that? Obviously, in this COVID world and jumping on a bus and, a lot of people in a small space. Talk about your concerns heading into this year.
It's interesting. There's no doubt about it. And fingers crossed that we're both traveling, depending on how everything works out. And I mean, it's going to be very interesting. The league's done a phenomenal job of really spelling everything out to try and get us from the starting line in a few weeks to the finish line in June or July, depending on who ends up making it all the way to the final. Like, it's going to take some work. You've seen it. The bubbles worked out great in the NHL and the NBA, but you've seen hiccups in Major League Baseball, the NFL, and the NCAA. And you just keep your fingers crossed that there are no hiccups in this league, because you don't want to see things make any left turns or really, get thrown too out of whack, and you want to just try and keep it as normal as possible. And you just hope that you can be as transparent with all the fans as you can be. And I think our organization does a good job with that. And I know that there's probably going to be some growing pains through all of it, where, some people in some markets may have to have their seat moved, or you won't be able to have necessarily that one-on-one in-person player access that you normally would. So it's going to force us to be creative too. And with a lot of the community work, try and maybe set up some virtual stuff, set up virtual appearances with some classrooms, and just trying to really think of how we can still be able to do what we traditionally do and be successful in minor league hockey with those connections with our fans and still have a good product on the ice. And like I said, the biggest overlying mark is to be able to go from start to finish without any problems.
Well, that's a good point. What you're saying about doing the virtual stuff, because everybody's gone virtual this year. I mean, a lot of people are working from home. Kids are taking, school classes and stuff like that from home. Have you guys done anything so far, the Wheeling Nailers, as far as virtual interaction with your fans? And do you have anything planned, for the immediate future, as well as throughout the season that you can talk about right now?
I haven't done anything this summer with it, but once I get the players in town, that's really where I want to take off. And I've had a couple conversations with a few of the guys, and they've been very receptive to the ideas of it. So I was lucky enough; my fiance bought a whole bunch of kids' hockey books during the summer. So we have those to do readings to classrooms. I figure we can do like Q&A type sessions. We might even be able to do like a phys ed where we have them do certain physical activities, stretches, or whatnot. So there's a couple different ideas that we've kicked around, and I'm excited to try and see what we're going to be able to make work in the season. Even like we used to do dress like a nailer, where we'd have a kid dress up in the gear. So maybe we'll have the players dress each other. Maybe we'll have one of them wear a helmet that doesn't necessarily fit, or just something to get a laugh. Again,
Mhm.
something to make that personal connection, and have the kids talk about it and say, "Hey, I got to see one of the nailers on video today. That was cool."
TJ, just curious, what has been the response from your fans with concerns? Obviously, older fans not wanting to maybe come back because they're concerned about sitting in a building where other people are around, and maybe the concerns of wearing a mask for a 3-hour game. Uh, what are some of the phone calls you guys are fielding, and talk about what it might look like if you go to a game in Wheeling this year?
Yeah, there's definitely been a lot of questions. I mean, the first question, and we've put the ask out there for the health department, the city, the state, the arena, so we can have a waiver, probably hoping for about 1,500 people allowed in the building. And that's been the number one question is, hey, when can we have fans? Like they're itching for it. And that's awesome. Like the passion that they have, that they want to dive back into this thing is I absolutely love it. But yeah, I would assume that there's probably going to be a rule that you're probably going to have to wear a mask. There's probably going to be social distancing guidelines on who's going to be sitting where. Like, there's definitely going to be those. I mean, I've been in the arena, like, I've seen the hand sanitizer dispensers. I've seen the plexiglass in front of the concessions. That looks a lot different than it ever used to. I think one of the areas that really kind of opened my eyes was Generations Club, which is located near our locker room. It's on the other side of a doorway, and it was essentially a restaurant in there where Generations, local business, would essentially operate their restaurant in the arena. And there you would have your normal tables and you would have your booths set up just like a regular restaurant would. But because of all these protocols, now it's individual tables with individual chairs. It almost looks like a classroom set up. And I'm like, wow, that's a different looking world. So that'll be interesting to see how it all works out, and to see how it goes too of when we feed the players and where we're going to feed them and how we're going to feed them and all that, how that's all going to work out. It's going to be interesting. There's going to be a lot to learn in the next month to see how everything's going to go by the time we drop the puck on December 12th.
Well, you were just talking about a couple minutes ago. We were talking about uh, the level of player we're seeing now because of all these different leagues. Not some may not be participating, and players not going overseas. They're staying here in North America. What about with the American Hockey League now announcing that their tentative start date is February 5th? How do you think that's going to impact the league? Obviously, it won't impact it up front because there'll be a lot of teams that'll get good players in, but especially the contracted players. How do you see that happening? I should say unfolding as a season progresses.
I'm curious to see that too. And I asked Mark French that last week in an interview we did, and we're trying to figure out what the parameters are going to be too, because I can't imagine that you're just going to let AHL teams just dump 20 players on you and say, hey, get the season started, as much as they want to see their players play games and
Yeah.
probably play more games. Like, I can't imagine that the ECHL is going to say, hey, that's no problem. And then run into a similar scenario like when you had the 2012-13 NHL lockout, and then January came along and you got teams absolutely rated. I'll never forget, we were in Orlando the first series after the lockout, and we played 14 skaters and 2 goalies that night, 3
Mm.
guys who hadn't even played a game all year. And I was like, oh my goodness, like I'm meeting guys in the airport going, who are you? Trying to figure out who the team's going to be. We got curb stomped 7-2 that first game out of the break, but just kind of see how they want to, make that work, because number one, do you want players to develop? Absolutely. You want to have that chance as much as you can. And I know that some NHL teams are sending some players to Europe, but that may not be an option. So the ECHL, that's what we're built for, is developing. But you don't want to flood it too much where, like I said, by the time their season gets going in February, where you're just having to start trying to pull guys back as quickly as you can and pull out your roster. So I'm going to be really fascinated to see just what they allow, how many, because like we're an organization with Pittsburgh and Wilkes-Barre. It's not uncommon for us to get 6, 8, 10 players at a given time on our roster and not as many ECHL contracts. So with us, like, that's definitely a big question to see what it's going to look like, both what Pittsburgh Wilkes-Barre want to do and what the ECHL allows.
Well, DJ, I can't thank you enough for doing this tonight. Fond memories, as you mentioned, coming to Wheeling, especially that great hotel. God, I'm drawing a blank on what the name of it is. What's that?
Ogilvy.
Ogilvy, yes. Where, funny story, I don't even know if I told Maurice, but I'll leave you guys with this. So it's basically like a log cabin, and you're literally out there in the middle of the wilderness. And of course, everybody that knows me knows I love fresh air. Opened my door. I was in there doing some work on my computer, and all of a sudden I turn around. I felt the presence of someone behind me, and I looked behind me, and a deer had walked halfway into my room. And I panicked because I thought, all right, what do I do? Obviously that deer looked mad. So I just kind of looked at him and said, hey, get out. And he backed up quickly, and I never shut that door so quick in my life. And I thought, man, I'll never complain about Steve Martinson coming in my room again after, just kidding, Marty, if you're seeing this. But great location, Ogilvy, one of my favorite venues to go to on the road. We happened to be there at Christmas a couple of years ago, and man, it was all decorated for Christmas in the snow. It really is a neat town.
Yeah, you were there for the Festival of Lights, which they do every year. That's one of the things that if you're in Wheeling and you're lucky to be there November, December, January, you absolutely have to see it. So I'm glad you got to see it. But yeah, I love the location of it. Like it really, it's got that nice outdoor feel. And it is funny that you got the deer. I wonder what room service would have done if you would have called the front desk and say, hi, I have a deer in my room.
They would have probably told me to quit drinking and go back to sleep. Boys, thank you very much. Maurice, as always, my great partner, DJ Abisalih, as I like to call him, America's favorite DJ. Thank you guys for joining us around the ECHL.